I am Mason, 38 years old, and my brother told me my family was better off without me right before demanding I fund his latest get-rich-quick scheme. Before I tell you about the moment, I left them with absolutely nothing but the clothes on their backs. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. It was a Tuesday evening, specifically the date of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. The setting was the oceanfront villa that I had paid for, renovated, and maintained for the last 5 years. The air was salty and thick with humidity, typical for late summer in Florida. I was standing on the travertine patio, looking out at the Atlantic, holding a glass of scotch that cost more than my first car. Inside, the sound of clinking silverware and forced laughter drifted through the open French doors. My mother, Linda, and my father, Robert, were seated at the head of the long mahogany table. To their right sat my older brother, Caleb. Caleb was 40, 2 years my senior, but he still carried himself with the reckless arrogance of a college freshman on spring break. He was wearing a linen suit that I knew he hadn't paid for, and on his wrist sat a Rolex Submariner that I had bought him for his 35th birthday, a gift I had hoped would mark a turning point in his maturity. It hadn't. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, and walked back inside. The air conditioning hit me, cooling the sweat on the back of my neck. Mason, finally joining us. My father boomed. His face was flushed, likely from the third bottle of Cabernet I had provided. We were just talking about Caleb's new venture. My stomach tightened. Venture was a dangerous word in the Whitmore household. It usually meant a hole in the ground that I would have to fill with money. It's not just a venture, Dad, Caleb said, leaning forward, his eyes manic with excitement. It's the future. Crypto Kingdom. It's an algorithmic trading platform. I've got an inside track. My buddy Hunter says the ROI is projecting at 300% within the first quarter. I sat down, placing my glass on the table with a deliberate thud. Hunter, I asked, keeping my voice level. Is that the same Hunter who sold you the timeshare in Mexico that didn't exist? The one I had to hire a lawyer to get you out of? The room went quiet. My mother sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation that signaled I was ruining the mood. Mason, don't be so negative, she said, cutting into her steak. Your brother is trying to build something. You should be supportive. I am supportive, Mom, I said, looking at her. I support this entire family. I pay the mortgage on this house. I pay the property taxes. I pay for the cars in the driveway. I pay for your health insurance. That's support. Asking questions about a scam isn't negativity. It's due diligence. Caleb slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You think because you got lucky in real estate you're the only one with a brain? You think you're better than us? I don't think I'm better, I replied calmly. I think I'm the only one who understands how money works. You want to liquidate the equity in this house to put into this platform, Caleb. That's what you proposed before dinner. Do you know what happens if that platform fails? Mom and Dad lose their home. It won't fail, Caleb shouted, standing up now. His face was red, a vein bulging in his neck. You're just jealous because this is going to be bigger than your little apartment complexes. You're scared I'm going to eclipse you. I looked at my father. Robert was staring at his wine glass, refusing to meet my eyes. He had always preferred Caleb. Caleb was the football star in high school, the golden boy who could do no wrong, even when he crashed the family car or failed out-of-state college. I was the quiet one, the nerd, the one who studied architecture and finance, the one they called boring. Dad, I asked, are you really okay with him gambling the house? Robert looked up, his eyes glassy. Caleb says it's a sure thing, Mason. And, well, you've been very controlling lately. Maybe it's time we let Caleb handle the finances. He has vision. I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. Controlling? I ensure the bills are paid so you don't get evicted. You hold it over our heads, Caleb yelled. He was pacing now, gesturing wildly. Every time you pay for something, you look at us with that smug face. We're sick of it. We don't need your charity, and we definitely don't need your judgment. You need my money, though, I pointed out. We don't need you, Caleb screamed. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. We're going to be rich with this investment. We don't need your scraps. Honestly, Mason, you bring everyone down. You're a dark cloud. We're better off without you. I froze. I looked at my mother. She was smiling, nodding along with Caleb, looking at him with adoring eyes. I looked at my father. He was smirking, that weak, pathetic smirk of a man who enjoys seeing someone else take the heat. Is that true? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Do you all feel that way? That you're better off without me? Oh, stop being dramatic, Mason, my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. But yes, your brother has a point. You are exhausting. Maybe if you stepped back, the energy in this family would improve. Better off without me? I repeated, letting the words sink in. It was like a key turning in a lock I had been trying to pick for 20 years. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I didn't list the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had poured into their lives. I just felt light. Okay, I said. Okay. Caleb blinked, confused by my lack of resistance. You're right, I said, standing up. I have been controlling. I've been standing in the way of your independence. If you're better off without me, then I should go. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key fob to the Porsche Panamera parked in the driveway, the company car I let Caleb drive because he said it helped his image. I placed the keys gently on the pristine white tablecloth. What's that? Caleb asked. I took a taxi here from the airport. I lied. You can keep the car for tonight. I'll arrange my own way home. I pulled out my phone. Under the table, I opened a text thread with Elijah, my lawyer and best friend. I typed 3 words. Execute Plan 0. I hit send. Where are you going? My mother asked, annoyed. We haven't cut the cake. I'm leaving, Mom. You said you're better off without me. I'm respecting your wishes. I walked toward the door. Don't expect us to come crawling back when this deal makes millions. Caleb shouted after me. You're out of the trust, Mason. You're out. I stopped at the door and looked back at them one last time. They looked like a tableau of greed and ignorance. They had no idea that the trust didn't exist. They had no idea that the wine they were drinking was charged to my card. They had no idea that the roof over their heads was legally mine. Goodbye, I said. I walked out into the humid night. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing my decision. I walked down the long driveway to the main road. I didn't call a taxi immediately. I needed a moment. I stood under a street lamp, the buzzing of the cicadas filling the silence. My phone vibrated. It was Elijah. Received. Are you absolutely sure, Mason? There is no undo button on this. I looked at the message. I looked back at the house, glowing warm and golden in the night. I imagined them inside, laughing, probably toasting to their freedom from my tyranny, celebrating the imaginary millions Caleb was going to make. I typed back, burn it down, metaphorically speaking, cut them off, everything. I put the phone in my pocket. A sense of peace settled over me, profound and terrifying. They wanted a life without Mason. I was going to give it to them. The ride back to the city was long, giving me plenty of time to think. The driver, a quiet man named Samuel, seemed to sense I wasn't in the mood for conversation. I watched the highway lights blur past, and my mind drifted back to how we got here. They called me boring. They called me controlling. But for the last decade, my life had been nothing but a desperate cleanup operation for their disasters. I remembered the day 10 years ago when the cracks first started to show. I was 28, just starting to make real money as an architect. I had bought a small condo, my first real asset. I was so proud. I invited them over for dinner to celebrate. Midway through the meal, my father, Robert, broke down crying. He confessed he had gambled away his retirement fund and taken out a second mortgage on their house without Mom knowing. The bank was threatening foreclosure. I don't know what to do, Mason. He had sobbed into my new sofa. I can't tell your mother. It would kill her. I sold the condo the next week. I used the equity to pay off the arrears on their mortgage and settle his gambling debts. I moved back into a rental. When I told them, Mom didn't hug me. She just said, "Well, it's good you didn't really need that space anyway, Mason. It was too big for a single man." That was the beginning. Then there was Caleb, the golden child. When he got arrested for a DUI 3 years ago, crashing into a parked police cruiser, who did they call? Not a lawyer. They called me. It was 3 a.m. I went down to the station, paid the bail, and hired the best defense attorney in the state to get the charges reduced so he wouldn't do jail time. That cost me $40,000. When Caleb walked out of the station, he didn't thank me. He complained that the coffee in the holding cell was cold. And Mom? She blamed the police officer for parking in a misleading spot. I became the family bank, the insurance policy, the fixer. I worked 80-hour weeks, designing skyscrapers and managing construction crews, while they went on vacations I paid for. I drove a sensible sedan for years so Caleb could lease sports cars to keep up appearances for his vague consulting business. I was boring because I talked about budgets. I was negative because I talked about contracts. I was the adult in a house full of children. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to the present. It was Elijah again. Banking alert set. Credit cards frozen. Utility transfer requests submitted. You have a meeting with me at 8 a.m. tomorrow to sign the final affidavits. I closed my eyes. Elijah was the only one who knew the truth. We had gone to college together. He had watched me drain my accounts time and time again. For years, he had begged me to structure my assets differently. Stop giving them cash, he had told me 5 years ago. Buy the debt. Buy the house. Put everything in your name. If you're going to pay for their lives, own their lives. It's the only way to protect yourself. I had listened. I created a shell company, Whitmore Holdings LLC. When the bank came for my parents' house a second time, I bought the note. Technically, I was their landlord. When Caleb needed a car, the company bought it and leased it to him for $0. They never read the paperwork. They just signed where I told them to sign, happy to have the shiny new toys. They thought I was just handling the boring administrative stuff. They thought they were the kings of the castle. They didn't realize they were guests in my hotel. The taxi pulled up to my building. It wasn't the rental anymore. 2 years ago, I had quietly purchased the penthouse in the city's newest luxury tower, a building I had designed. I never invited them there. I told them I lived in a modest apartment downtown. It was my sanctuary. I walked into the lobby. The doorman, Henry, tipped his cap. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. You're back early." "Long night, Henry," I said. "Do me a favor. If anyone from my family shows up, my brother, my parents, they are not allowed up. Under any circumstances." Henry's eyes widened slightly, but his professional mask didn't slip. "Understood, sir. Removing access permissions now." I took the private elevator up to the 45th floor. The doors opened directly into my living room. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the city skyline, glittering like a jewelry box. It was quiet here, peaceful. I poured myself a drink and stood by the window. I felt a pang of guilt, a phantom limb pain. It was conditioning. I had been trained to feel guilty whenever I wasn't serving them. I had to remind myself of their faces at dinner, the smirk on my father's face, the way my mother laughed when Caleb said I was useless. No, I thought, no more guilt. The next morning, I walked into Elijah's office at 8 a.m. sharp. Elijah looked tired but determined. He had a stack of files on his desk. "You look like a man who slept like a baby or didn't sleep at all," Elijah said, pouring coffee. "A bit of both," I admitted. "Is it ready?" "It is," Elijah said, tapping the stack. "This is the nuclear option, Mason. We are terminating the lease on the Porsche. We are initiating eviction proceedings on the beach house. Technically, they are tenants at will, and since they haven't paid rent in 5 years, we can give them 30 days. But the utilities? Since the accounts are in your name, we can shut them off today." "Do it," I said. "And the supplementary credit cards? Cancel them. Report them as lost or stolen if you have to. Just cut the line." Elijah looked at me over his glasses. "You know they are going to freak out. This isn't just cutting them off. This is pulling the rug out from under their entire reality. They said they were better off without me, I said, signing the first document. I'm just giving them a chance to prove it. Caleb is a genius investor, remember? He should be able to cover the overhead. Elijah chuckled darkly. Caleb couldn't cover a lunch tab without your Amex. That's not my problem anymore. I signed the last page. What about the investors Caleb was talking about? This Hunter guy. Elijah's face turned serious. I looked into that. It's bad, Mason. It's a Ponzi scheme. Classic pyramid. And I heard rumors that Caleb didn't just use his own money. He borrowed. From guys you don't borrow from. Loan sharks. Let's just say they aren't FDIC insured. I paused, the pen hovering over the paper. A protective instinct flared up, hot and familiar. The Caleb was in trouble with sharks. Then I heard his voice in my head. We don't need you. You bring everyone down. I signed the paper. If he's in trouble, I said, handing the file back to Elijah, he can use his Crypto Kingdom profits to pay them off. I'm done saving him from consequences. Elijah nodded, sealing the folder. Done. The letters go out via courier this morning. The electronic freeze happens. Now. He pressed a key on his laptop. It's done, Elijah said. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the engine of my life finally restarting, this time with me behind the wheel. Let's get lunch, I said. I'm starving. For the first 48 hours, the silence was absolute. I imagined they were basking in the glow of my absence, perhaps thinking I was sulking in a hotel room somewhere, waiting for them to apologize so I could resume my duties as the family servant. I went to work. I focused on the Skyline project, a massive eco-friendly commercial complex that was set to be the crown jewel of my firm. I had lunch with Olivia, a prominent real estate developer, and a woman I had been seeing quietly for 6 months. You seem lighter, Olivia said, swirling her Chardonnay. She was a striking woman, sharp as a tack and fiercely independent. She knew about my family, but only the surface details. I took out the trash, I said, smiling. Or rather, I let the trash take itself out. While I was enjoying my freedom, the reality of the situation was beginning to crash down on the Whitmore family. I didn't see it firsthand, but thanks to the digital trail and reports from the security company I employed for the house, I could reconstruct the chaos perfectly. It started with my mother. According to the credit card alerts on my phone, which I had set to notify only before the accounts closed, Linda Whitmore attempted to pay for a $600 facial at the Serenity Sands Spa at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. Transaction declined. Amex Black ending in 4002. She would have been confused. She would have handed them the backup visa. Transaction declined. Visa Platinum ending in 1189. I could imagine the scene. The receptionist, polite but firm. My mother, flushing red, rummaging through her Gucci bag. A bag I bought, muttering about bank errors. She probably had to call Dad. But Dad didn't have any money. Dad's cards were supplementary to mine too. Then came Caleb. Thursday morning. The repo operation. This was the one detail I had specifically asked Elijah to arrange for maximum impact. I knew Caleb's routine. He went to a high-end coffee shop at 9 a.m. every morning to network, which meant hitting on college girls. I received a text from the asset recovery agent at 9:15 a.m. Assets secured. Target was resistant. Police were not involved, but it was close. Here is what happened. Caleb walked out of the coffee shop, latte in hand, looking for the Porsche Panamera. It was gone. In its place stood a tow truck and a large man named Mike. Hey! Caleb would have shouted. Where is my car? That's a $100,000 car. It's a company car, Mike would have explained, handing him a slip. Whitmore Holdings LLC revoked the authorization. You're not an employee, Mr. Whitmore. I'm Mason's brother. I own that company. Caleb would have lied. Paperwork says Mason Whitmore is the sole proprietor. And he says give him the keys to the weekend convertible too, or we come back with the sheriff. Caleb had to take an Uber home. But his Uber account was linked to my credit card. Transaction declined. He had to walk 3 miles in Italian loafers. By Thursday night, the real darkness set in. Literally. I was sitting in my penthouse, reading a book, when my phone started blowing up. It wasn't a text this time. It was a notification from the smart home system I had installed in the beach house. System alert. Main power grid disconnected. Switching to battery backup. Security only. I had instructed the utility company to shut off the power at 6 p.m. No more AC. No more refrigerator. No more heated pool. In Florida in August. Then the phone calls started. First Caleb. 5 missed calls. Then Mom. 3 missed calls. Then Dad. Then a number I didn't recognize. Probably a neighbor's phone they borrowed because I had cut their cell phone plans too. I watched the phone vibrate on the coffee table, sipping my tea. It was a cruel thing, perhaps, but they had wanted independence. Independence means paying your own electric bill. But the real twist of the week wasn't the power or the car. It was something Elijah discovered and forwarded to me on Friday morning. You need to see this, Elijah said on the phone. Check your secure email. I opened the file. It was a police report from the previous night, coupled with surveillance photos from the beach house gate. A black SUV had pulled up to the villa gates at 10 p.m. 2 men got out. They weren't delivery drivers. One of them was identified by facial recognition software, which I used for site security, as an associate of a known loan shark organization in Miami. They didn't break in. They just taped a note to the gate. The photo of the note was grainy, but legible. Tick-tock, Caleb. The kingdom is crumbling. The crypto thing, I whispered to myself. Caleb owes them big, Mason, Elijah said. The investment he made? He leveraged it. He borrowed 50 grand from these guys to put into the crypto scheme, thinking he'd double it in a week and pay them back. But the crypto site went dark yesterday. It was a rug pull. He lost the money? He lost their money. And now they know where he lives. Or where he lived. My heart rate spiked. This was physical danger. Should I call the police? If you call the police, the sharks might escalate, Elijah warned. Or Caleb goes to jail for fraud depending on how he structured the loan. But here is the kicker, Mason. Caleb told these guys that you were his partner. He told them his wealthy brother, the architect, was backing the deal. I slammed my fist on the desk. He used my name? He did. That's why they went to the house. They think you live there too. The delusion of my family wasn't just pathetic anymore. It was dangerous. Caleb hadn't just insulted me. He had painted a target on my back. What do? I asked. You stay in the fortress, Elijah said. Your building has armed security. The beach house doesn't. And you proceed with the eviction. You need to legally separate yourself from them immediately. If they are on your property, the sharks think you are connected. We need them out. Now. I hung up. The satisfaction of the last 2 days evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't a game of teaching them a lesson anymore. This was a war for my survival. I looked at my phone. A text from Caleb popped up, coming through via Wi-Fi from a nearby unsecured network. Mason, please pick up. It's an emergency. Mom is crying. It's so hot. We have no food. Also, some guys came by. I need $50,000. Just a loan. I swear I'll pay you back. We're family. I stared at the words. We're family. The magic spell they had used to bind me for decades. I typed a reply. You said you were better off without me. Prove it. I blocked the number. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. By Monday morning, the Whitmore family had reached a breaking point. Without electricity, with the food rotting in the sub-zero fridge, and with the shadow of organized crime looming over the driveway, they did exactly what I expected them to do. They came to find the source of the money. I was in my office on the 30th floor of the Whitmore and Associates building. The space was sleek, modern, glass and steel, a testament to the order and precision I valued. I was in the middle of the final signing for the Skyline project. Olivia was there, along with the investors and a notary. This is a game changer. Mason, Olivia whispered, squeezing my hand under the table. The biggest contract of your career. I couldn't have done it without the focus I found recently, I replied, signing my name with a flourish. Suddenly, the intercom on the conference table buzzed. It was the head of security, a former Marine named Marcus. Mr. Whitmore, I have a situation in the lobby. I stiffened. Go ahead, Marcus. I have 3 individuals here claiming to be your family. Robert, Linda, and Caleb Whitmore. They are distressed. They are demanding to see you. Mr. Caleb is yelling something about you stealing his car. The room went silent. The investors looked at me. Olivia looked at me, her brow furrowed. Are they on the guest list, Marcus? I asked, my voice calm, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. No, sir. Then they don't come up. Tell them I am in a meeting and cannot be disturbed. I tried that, sir. Your father is threatening to call the press. He says he's going to tell everyone you've abandoned your elderly parents. I closed my eyes for a second. The audacity. They were trying to blackmail me with bad publicity in my own lobby. Excuse me for a moment, I said to the investors. A minor personal matter. I walked over to the wall monitor and switched the feed to the lobby camera. There they were. They looked disheveled. My father was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt. My mother's hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was frizzy from the humidity and lack of AC. Caleb looked manic, sweating profusely, pacing back and forth in front of the turnstiles. I watched them. For years, these people had been giants in my mind. Now, on the black and white screen, they looked small, desperate. Marcus, I said into the intercom, escort them out. If they refuse, call the police for trespassing. Mason, Olivia said, standing behind me. Are you sure? It's your parents. I turned to her. They aren't here to see their son, Olivia. They are here to see the ATM. If I let them up, if I give them 1 inch, they will take everything. This deal, this company, my sanity. I have to protect this. On the screen, I saw Marcus step forward with 2 other guards. Caleb lunged at Marcus. It was a mistake. Marcus easily restrained him, twisting his arm behind his back. My mother screamed. My father looked around, terrified, realizing his authority meant nothing in the real world. They were guided firmly, out the revolving doors and onto the hot pavement. I watched them go. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away before anyone could see. I apologize, I said, turning back to the table. Where were we? The investors looked at me with a new kind of respect. In business, the ability to make hard decisions is valued. They didn't see a cruel son. They saw a leader who couldn't be compromised. We were just discussing the timeline, one investor said. I sat down and finished the meeting. We popped champagne. I smiled. I shook hands. But inside, I was preparing for the final blow. That afternoon, I met with Elijah again. They tried to breach the office, I told him. I heard, Elijah said, and that accelerates our timeline. The eviction notice expires tomorrow. Technically, we gave them a 3-day quit or pay notice for the rent arrears, which is aggressive but legal since they haven't paid in 5 years. They obviously can't pay the back rent of... What is it? $300,000, I said. Fair market value for 5 years, right? So tomorrow we go in. The sheriff will execute the eviction. But there is something else, Mason. Elijah slid a manila envelope across the desk. Twist number 2. You know how you asked me to do a full forensic audit of your father's finances to see where all the money you gave him actually went? I assumed it was just bad investments and Caleb's lifestyle. It was that, Elijah said. But it was also this. I opened the envelope. Photographs. Bank statements. My hands shook as I held a picture of a woman. She was younger than my mother, maybe late 40s, and a boy about 12 years old. They were standing in front of a modest house in a neighboring town. Who is this? I asked, my throat dry. That is Monica, Elijah said. And that is your half-brother, Jason. Your father has been supporting a second family for 15 years. Mason. That's why he was always broke. That's why he needed your help with the mortgage. He was funneling your money, your hard-earned money, to them. The world tilted on its axis. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was existential. My mother, the woman who had guilt-tripped me my whole life, was being played for a fool. And I had been unwittingly funding my father's infidelity. Does Mom know? No. We found records of jewelry sales too. Your mother's diamond earrings? The ones she thought were stolen by the cleaning lady 2 years ago? Robert sold them. The deposit slip is right there. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. Tomorrow, I said, my voice sounding like grinding stones. We go to the house tomorrow. I want to be there when the sheriff kicks them out. And I want to tell him myself. Mason, that's going to be ugly. They wanted a life without me, I said, standing up. I'm just going to make sure they have a life with the truth. All of it. The convoy arrived at the beach house at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. It looked like a funeral procession. First, the sheriff's cruiser. Then, the moving truck I had hired, a final act of mercy to move their belongings to storage. Then, my car, a black Audi, understated and powerful. And finally, Elijah's car. The house looked abandoned. The lawn was overgrown. I had canceled the landscapers too. The windows were dark. We got out. The heat was oppressive. The sheriff, a no-nonsense man named Deputy Miller, walked up to the door and pounded on it. Sheriff's Department. Eviction notice. No answer. He pounded again. Finally, the door cracked open. My father stood there. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. Unshaven, wearing stained shorts. The smell of stale air and rotting food wafted out. What is this? Robert asked, his voice trembling. Robert Whitmore, you and the occupants are hereby ordered to vacate the premises immediately pursuant to the court order granted to Whitmore Holdings, LLC. The sheriff recited. You can't do this, Robert shouted. This is my house, my son. Where's Mason? I stepped out from behind the sheriff. I'm right here, Dad. Robert's eyes locked onto me. Hate, pure, unadulterated hate. You traitor. You ungrateful little rat. You're doing this to your own parents. Caleb appeared behind him, looking pale and twitchy. Mom was in the hallway, clutching a rosary, weeping. I'm not doing anything, I said, walking up the steps, staying just out of reach. I'm just the landlord, and you're the tenants who haven't paid rent in 5 years. The lease is up. We're family, Mom wailed, rushing forward. Mason, baby, please. It's so hot. We have nowhere to go. You said you were better off without me, I reminded her. I'm letting you stand on your own 2 feet. Isn't that what you wanted? Caleb is the genius. Let him buy you a house. Caleb flinched. Mason, stop. The sharks, they're going to kill me. They think this is my house. If I lose this address, then you better start running, I said coldly. But before you go, there's one last thing we need to discuss. I nodded to Elijah. He stepped forward and handed the manila envelope to my mother. What is this? Linda asked, her hands shaking. Don't open that, Linda, Robert yelled, lunging for her. The sheriff stepped in, blocking Robert. Back off, sir. Linda opened the envelope. She pulled out the photos. She pulled out the bank statements. Time seemed to slow down. I watched her face transform. Confusion, realization, horror. She looked at the photo of the woman and the boy. She looked at the bank transfer records, dates that matched the times I had given Dad emergency loans. Robert, she whispered. Who is Monica? Robert slumped against the doorframe, defeated. Linda, I can explain. It was a mistake. 15 years isn't a mistake, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the air. It's a lifestyle I paid for. I turned to my mother. You called me useless. You called me controlling. But every dollar I gave you, every check I wrote to save this house, Dad siphoned off a percentage to support his other family. You weren't laughing at me because I was boring, Mom. You were laughing at the only person keeping this house of cards from falling on your head. Linda looked at Robert. She screamed. A primal, animalistic sound of betrayal. She flew at him, clawing at his face. You stole from me. You stole from our son for her. The sheriff had to separate them. Okay, folks, that's enough. Everyone out. Now. It was chaos. The movers started hauling furniture out. My mother was sobbing on the lawn, refusing to look at my father. Caleb was pacing by the curb, frantically texting, looking over his shoulder for the black SUV. Robert sat on the steps, head in his hands, a broken man. I stood by my car, watching it all. Caleb walked up to me. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. Mason, please, I need $5,000, just to get out of town. If I stay here, Vinny's guys will find me. I looked at my brother. I remembered him stealing my lunch money in elementary school. I remembered him wrecking my bike. I remembered him humiliating me at the anniversary dinner. You have a Rolex, I said, pointing to his wrist. Sell it. That should get you a bus ticket to somewhere very far away. It's fake, Caleb whispered, shame coloring his cheeks. I sold the real one you gave me a year ago to buy crypto. This is a knockoff. I laughed. A short, dry laugh. Of course it is. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a single $20 bill. Here, I said. This is for lunch. Consider it my final contribution to the crypto kingdom. I dropped the bill on the ground. You're a monster, Caleb spat. No, I said, opening my car door. I'm just a guy who finally learned the value of $1. And the value of myself. I got in the car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the sheriff putting a padlock on the gate. I saw my family, fractured and screaming at each other on the sidewalk, surrounded by boxes of their unpaid-for possessions. It was the saddest thing I had ever seen, and the most beautiful. The aftermath wasn't instantaneous. It was a slow, grinding disintegration. I heard from Uncle Thomas, my father's younger brother and the only decent man in the extended family, about where they ended up. There at the Starlight Motel on Route 9, Thomas told me over the phone a week later. It's not good, Mason. 2 rooms. Dad is sleeping in the bathtub because Mom won't let him in the bed. She filed for divorce yesterday. Good for her, I said, signing a contractor invoice at my desk. She wants to talk to you, Mason. She says she's sorry. She says she didn't know about the money or the other family. She knew I was hurting, I said. She knew Caleb was abusing my generosity, and she cheered him on. Ignorance of the affair doesn't excuse 30 years of neglect, Thomas. I know, son. I know. I had to ask. How is Caleb? Gone, Thomas said. He skipped town the night of the eviction, took your dad's wallet and ran. Rumor has it he went out west. Or maybe Mexico. He's terrified of those loan sharks. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like reading about a stranger in a newspaper. Caleb had chosen his path. He had chosen the golden child delusion over hard work. And Dad, he's trying to get a job, but at 65 with no resume for the last 20 years and a bad back. It's tough. He asked if I could call you for a loan. Don't, I warned. If you give him a dime of my money, Thomas, I cut you off too. And I like you. Thomas sighed. I won't. I promise. The reality of their situation was harsh. Without my credit score, they couldn't rent a decent apartment. Without my cash flow, they couldn't even afford the deposit. They were learning, for the first time in their lives, the true cost of living. One evening, about a month after the eviction, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't know. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello, Mason. It was my father. His voice was cracked, weak. Robert, I said. I couldn't call him Dad anymore. I'm at the shelter downtown, he said. Your mother took the last of the cash and went to stay with her sister in Ohio. I'm alone, Mason. That sounds difficult, I said neutrally. I'm your father, he snapped, a flash of the old anger returning. You can't leave me here. I raised you. You didn't raise me, I corrected him. You lived in the same house as me while I raised myself. And then you billed me for the privilege. I'm sorry about Monica, he whimpered. I'm sorry about the money. Just get me a small apartment, a studio, anything. I'll pay you back. With what, Robert? With the money from your next scam? With the money you stole from Mom? Silence on the line. You told me I was useless, I said. You stood there and smiled when Caleb said you were better off without me. I am honoring your words. You are free, Robert. You are completely 100% free of my influence. Enjoy it. Mason, please. I hung up. I sat there in my penthouse, the city lights twinkling below me. I poured a glass of wine. My hand was steady. My heart was calm. I had lost my family, but I realized, with a clarity that hit me like a lightning bolt, that I never really had them. I had only leased them. I had paid a monthly subscription fee for a counterfeit version of love. And when the payment stopped, the service was canceled. I wasn't lonely. I had Olivia, who loved me for my mind, not my wallet. I had Elijah, a friend who had my back when I was blind. I had my work. I had my dignity. I walked to the window and looked out at the vast, sprawling city. Somewhere down there, in the shadows, my father was sleeping on a cot. Somewhere, my brother was running from his debts. Somewhere, my mother was crying over a wasted life. It was a tragedy, but it wasn't my tragedy anymore. I took a sip of wine. To independence, I whispered to the empty room. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt rich. Time is a funny thing. When you are drowning, seconds feel like hours. When you finally breach the surface and fill your lungs with air, a year can pass in the blink of an eye. It had been exactly 365 days since I watched the sheriff padlock the gate to the beach house. 1 year since I drove away from the wreckage of the Whitmore family. I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Vertex, the architectural masterpiece that had consumed my life for the past 18 months. This wasn't just another building. It was my declaration of independence. It was a 40-story eco-conscious residential tower that twisted toward the sky like a strand of DNA. Tonight was the grand opening gala. The air up here was crisp, devoid of the suffocating humidity that always seemed to hang over my parents' house. I took a sip of sparkling water. I had cut back on the scotch and looked out at the city. It was mine, not in a greedy sense, but in a way that felt earned. Every beam, every sheet of glass, every line of code in the smart building interface was the result of my focus. A focus that had been liberated the moment I stopped funneling my energy into a black hole of ungrateful relatives. You're hiding again, a voice said behind me. I turned to see Olivia. She looked breathtaking in a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. But it wasn't the dress that held my attention. It was her eyes. They were clear, honest, and filled with a warmth I was still learning to accept without suspicion. Just taking a moment, I said, offering her a hand. It's a lot of noise down there. They love you, Mason, she said, stepping into my personal space, her scent of jasmine and rain calming my nerves. The mayor just called you a visionary. The investors are already talking about a second tower in Chicago. You did it. We did it, I corrected her. No, she shook her head firmly. You did this. You designed this while your world was collapsing. You managed the construction while dealing with lawyers and auditors and the emotional fallout of a nuclear family war. Take the credit, Mason. It's okay to be the hero of your own story. I looked back at the skyline. It feels strange, quiet. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For my phone to ring with an emergency. For Caleb to need bail money. For Mom to need a new car. That phone doesn't ring anymore, Olivia reminded me gently. And if it does, you don't answer it. She was right, but the phantom vibrations were real. The recovery hadn't been a straight line. The first 3 months were the hardest. I had to testify in court regarding the eviction appeal my father tried to file pro se. It was a pathetic attempt. He claimed squatters' rights in a house I held the deed to. Seeing him in that courtroom, wearing an ill-fitting suit he probably bought at a thrift store, shuffling papers with shaking hands, was gut-wrenching. He looked small. The giant who had terrified me with his disapproval was just a sad old man who couldn't understand why the rules suddenly applied to him. The judge dismissed his case in 10 minutes. My father didn't look at me as he left the courtroom. He just stared at the floor, muttering about loyalty. Then there was the audit. The forensic accountants found more than just the second family. They found credit card fraud. Caleb had opened 3 cards in my name using my social security number years ago. I had a choice: pay the debt or file a police report for identity theft which would send my brother to prison. I filed the report. It wasn't vengeance. It was accountability. The detective told me Caleb was last seen in Las Vegas, working as a promoter for a low-level nightclub, trying to hustle tourists. When the warrant went out, he vanished. I didn't chase him. I didn't hire a private investigator. I just let him go. He was a ghost now, haunting someone else's wallet. Mason, Olivia touched my arm. There's someone downstairs asking for you. He says he's family. My stomach dropped. The peace shattered instantly. Who? I asked, my voice hardening. If it's Robert. No, she said quickly. He said his name is Thomas. He said he's your uncle. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Uncle Thomas. It's okay, I said. He's the good one. I went down to the lobby, bypassing the champagne-sipping socialites. I found Thomas standing near the security desk, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly 20 years old. He was holding a worn fedora in his hands, twisting the brim nervously. Uncle Thomas, I said, approaching him with a genuine smile. He looked up, his eyes widening as he took in the opulence of the building. Mason, my God, you built this. I did, I said, pulled him into a hug. He smelled like Old Spice and sawdust, the smell of my childhood, the smell of the woodshop where he used to let me build birdhouses while my father was out gambling. I didn't want to intrude, Thomas said, pulling back. I know this is a big night, fancy people, but I wanted to see it. I wanted to see you win. You're not intruding, I said. Come on, let's get a drink. Somewhere quiet. I led him to the private lounge reserved for VIPs. I poured him a whiskey, the good stuff, not the cheap blend he was used to. How are you holding up? I asked. Thomas took a sip and sighed. I'm getting by. The hardware store is slow, but it pays the bills. Mary is good. The grandkids are getting big. He hesitated, looking at his glass. I knew what was coming. The update. Tell me, I said. I can take it. Your mother. She's in Ohio, Thomas said quietly, living with Aunt Shelley. She works at a bakery now. Counter service. It's hard on her feet. Does she talk about me? She cries a lot, Thomas admitted. She sent a letter. She asked me to give it to you. She didn't have your address. I told her I didn't either, just to protect you, but... Well, here. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. It was wrinkled. I stared at it. Mason was written on the front in her loopy, elegant handwriting. The same handwriting that used to sign the checks I gave her. I took it. I didn't open it. Not yet. And Robert? I asked. Thomas grimaced. He's still in town. He's staying in a weekly rental near the docks. He works part-time as a night watchman at a scrapyard. He drinks a lot, Mason. He tells anyone who will listen that his son stole his empire. He believes his own lies. I nodded. It was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy of his own making. And the other family? Monica? She left him the second the money stopped coming, Thomas said with a dry chuckle. Apparently, she wasn't in it for his charming personality. She took the boy and moved to Atlanta. Robert has no one. I felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. Robert had chosen deception over family for decades. He was reaping the harvest he had sown. I have something for you too, Thomas, I said. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out a check I had written that morning. I slid it across the marble table. Thomas looked at it. He squinted, then his eyes went wide. He dropped the glass. Fortunately, it was empty. $250,000? He whispered. Mason, what is this? You were the only one who ever asked me how my day was, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You were the only one who came to my graduation. You were the only one who didn't look at me like a bank account. This is for your retirement, Thomas. Pay off the hardware store. Put some in a college fund for the grandkids. Take Mary to Italy like you always wanted. I can't take this, Thomas said, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't do anything special. You were decent, I said. In a family of vultures, being decent is extraordinary. Please, take it. It brings me joy to give it to you. That's how giving should feel, I've realized. It shouldn't feel like a robbery. Thomas wept. He didn't say thank you. He just grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard my knuckles cracked. It was the most honest exchange of currency I had ever participated in. Later that night, after the gala was over, after Thomas had gone home in a private car I arranged, I sat in my penthouse with Olivia. The city lights were a blanket of stars below us. I took out the letter from my mother. Are you going to open it? Olivia asked, kicking off her heels and curling up on the sofa next to me. I need to know, I said. I tore the envelope. I unfolded the single sheet of lined notebook paper. Dearest Mason, I hope this finds you well. I heard about your new building. I always knew you were talented. I miss you so much. It hurts every day. Your father is a devil. He ruined us. I want you to know that I had no idea about the other woman. If I had known, I would have left him years ago. I was a victim too, Mason. He manipulated me just like he manipulated you. My life is very hard now. My ankles swell from standing all day. Aunt Shelley is cruel to me. I was wondering if you could find it in your heart to forgive your mother. I don't need much. Just a small apartment near you. I could cook for you again. Remember my lasagna? Please, Mason. I'm your mother. Don't let me die like this. We are better off together. Love, Mom. I read it twice. What does it say? Olivia asked softly. She blames Dad, I said, my voice flat. She plays the victim, and then she asks for an apartment. She mentions her lasagna. I laughed, but it was a hollow sound. She didn't ask how I am. She didn't apologize for calling me useless. She didn't apologize for letting Caleb steal from me. She just wants a new host to attach herself to. She's consistent, Olivia noted. She says, we are better off together, I quoted. She forgot the part where they yelled, we are better off without you. I stood up and walked to the fireplace. It was a gas fireplace, modern and sleek. I held the letter over the flame. Mason, are you sure? Olivia asked. I forgive her, I said, watching the corner of the paper curl and brown. I forgive her for being who she is, but I will not let who she is destroy who I have become. I dropped the letter. The flames caught the paper, turning the dearest Mason into ash. It burned quickly, disappearing up the flue. Goodbye, Mom, I whispered. I turned back to Olivia. Marry me. It wasn't how I planned to propose. I had a ring in the safe. I had a plan for a trip to the Amalfi Coast next month. But in that moment, watching the last link to my toxic past burn away, I realized I didn't want to wait another second to start my real future. Olivia blinked, stunned. What? Marry me? I repeated, walking over and kneeling in front of her. Not because I need you to complete me. Not because I need someone to share the rent. But because I want you. I want to build a life with you. A real life. No secrets. No transaction fees. Just us. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She smiled. A radiant, beautiful smile that erased the memory of my mother's manipulative smirk. Yes, she said. Yes, you idiot. Yes. She kissed me, and for the first time in 39 years, I felt completely, irrevocably safe. 3 months after the proposal, on a crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself driving down a familiar stretch of coastal highway. I was behind the wheel of my own car, a vintage 1967 Mustang Fastback. I had restored myself. It wasn't a leased status symbol like the Porsche or the Lamborghini. It was a machine of muscle and grit, something that required care and attention, something that roared when you treated it right. I wasn't going to the beach house. I had sold that property 6 months ago to a developer who bulldozed it to build a boutique hotel. I felt zero nostalgia when the papers were signed. The family home was just a pile of stucco and drywall where my self-esteem had gone to die. No, I was driving to the state penitentiary. It wasn't a visit I wanted to make, but it was one I needed to make. Just once. To close the book. Caleb had been found. He hadn't just disappeared. He had imploded. He had tried to run a crypto scam in Nevada, targeting retirees. But he got sloppy. He got caught. And because of his prior record, which I hadn't erased this time, and the sheer scale of the fraud, the judge threw the book at him. 5 years. I walked into the visitation room. It smelled of bleach and despair. I sat behind the thick glass partition. A few minutes later, a guard escorted Caleb in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. His head was shaved. The tan was gone, replaced by a prison pallor. He looked thin. He sat down and picked up the phone. I picked up mine. "You came," Caleb said. His voice was raspy. "I came," I said. "Come to gloat?" he asked, a flicker of the old defiance in his eyes, but it was weak, like a dying ember. "No," I said. "I came to see if you were okay." Caleb laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I'm in a cage, Mason. I'm eating slop. I'm dodging shanks in the shower. I'm doing great." "You did this, Caleb?" I said quietly. Yeah. Personal responsibility. Blah, blah, blah." He leaned forward, his eyes darting around. "Look, Mason, I've been thinking. I have a lot of time to think. I know I screwed up, but I can change. I'm taking classes. Business management." I almost smiled. Even in here, he was hustling. "That's good, Caleb. I was thinking, when I get out, maybe you could help me get set up? Not a handout. An investment. I have this idea for a prison reform consultancy." I listened. I listened to the pitch. I listened to the manipulation. The tone was the same as it had been at the dinner table that night. "Give me. Fix me. Save me." I let him finish. "Are you done?" I asked. "I just need a chance, Mason. We're brothers. We share DNA," I said. "That's a biological accident. Brotherhood is a bond, and you broke that bond a long time ago. You sold it for a Rolex and a leased car. So you're just going to leave me here to rot?" "You're not rotting," I said. "You're serving time for crimes you committed. And when you get out, you will have a clean slate. But that slate will not include my name written on a check." I stood up. "Mason, don't walk away. Mom is writing me. She says you abandoned her too. She says you're cold." "I am cold," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I learned it from the best. But unlike you, I learned to keep my own fire warm." "You're useless," he screamed, slamming the receiver against the glass. "You're nothing without us to make you feel important." I hung up the phone. I didn't look back. As the heavy steel doors clanged shut behind me, the last voice of my past was silenced. I walked out into the sunlight. The air tasted sweet. I got back into my Mustang. I checked my phone. A text from Olivia. "Dinner reservation is at 7. Don't be late. I have a surprise." I smiled. A real surprise. Not a crisis. Not a demand. A joy. I started the engine. The V8 rumbled. A deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the chassis. I thought about my father watching the scrapyard at night, drinking cheap vodka, blaming the world. I thought about my mother, serving pastries in Ohio, waiting for a savior who wasn't coming. I thought of Caleb in his cell, plotting his next con. They were all trapped in prisons of their own making. Prisons built on entitlement, laziness, and deception. I had been in a prison too. Prison of guilt. A prison of duty. A prison where the warden was my own need for their approval. But I had walked out. I had pardoned myself. I pulled onto the highway, the road stretching out before me, endless and open. I rolled down the window and let the wind whip through the car. They said they were better off without me. It was the only honest thing they ever told me. But the real truth, the truth that made the engine roar and the sunset glow a little brighter, was simpler. I was infinitely, gloriously better off without them. I shifted gears, pressed the gas, and drove toward the horizon, leaving the rearview mirror behind. The story of Mason is extreme, but the dynamic of financial and emotional abuse is a silent epidemic in millions of families. We are often taught that family comes first, and that loyalty is unconditional. But Mason's journey teaches us a hard truth. Loyalty without reciprocity is just servitude. Many of you watching might be the Mason in your family, the fixer, the bank, the emotional punching bag. You might fear that setting boundaries makes you a bad person. It doesn't. It makes you a person with self-respect. You cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction, and you certainly shouldn't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. True independence isn't just about money. It's about breaking the psychological chains that bind your worth to what you can provide rather than who you are. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save yourself? Or are you currently struggling with the guilt of saying no? Drop a good in the comments if you believe Mason made the right choice. Or share your own story of setting boundaries. Let's create a community here where we remind each other that we are enough, just as we are. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of truth and triumph. You are worth it.